Artemis Fowl, more like Artemis bowel movements, are more enjoyable to watch than this movie.
Look around, this is what they call greatness.
So Artemis Fowl was originally going to be released by Disney in theaters, but since we live in 2020 and nothing's coming out, they decided to release it on Disney+. Every YouTube reviewer is flocking towards this movie like a bunch of vultures because it's the only thing that's come out in like 4 months. And trust me, they're not lying when they say it's awful, because Artemis Fowl is awful. And so, like, a little disclaimer, I've never read the Artemis Fowl books. All I know about them is that there's a kid that wears green glasses. I've seen the books on the shelves in like libraries and stuff, but I never decided to read it. The gist of this movie is that there's this little boy who's really smart and is apparently a criminal mastermind. His dad goes missing and he has to go find him. Also, there's like elves and trolls and dwarves and stuff. I have really no idea what's going on throughout this entire movie. Also, this movie is directed by Kenneth Branagh, and this is just probably his worst movie. It's so bad. This movie is so cliched. Every line you hear and everything you see, you've seen somewhere else and you've seen it done better. But let's start out with the positives before I get into the negatives. Some characters have Irish accents, and that's nice to listen to, I guess. Okay, on to the negatives. The acting is miserable, and I am so tired of seeing Josh Gad in everything.
No, I'm not.
He's got one role that he can play, and that's the role he played in the Book of Mormon and Frozen and Beauty and the Beast. It's all he's ever done. This is the first time I've seen him actually like try to act, and it's not good at all. I can't tell if he's trying to be serious and threatening or just this kind of comedic relief, because it just comes off as him being a silly Hagrid.
Everybody, stand back. It's feeding time.
The kid that plays Artemis Fowl, his name's like Ferdy Shaw or something. Like, yeah, he's a kid, but still he's just so bland, and I can't tell if it's because of the writing or because he can't act. There's this one scene where him and his butler are at the beach, and it's literally some of the worst line delivery I've ever heard in my life. Einstein and Hawking were right. Time can change. I want to save my dad. I know what I'm doing. Ugh. Laura McDonald, she plays the teenage fairy cop girl. She's okay. Colin Farrell's in the movie for like 2 seconds and he doesn't really do anything. He plays Artemis's dad, who's also named Artemis Fowl. There are 2 characters named Artemis Fowl. Judi Dench just really needs a new manager because this is her movie directly after Cats. This movie has some of the worst writing I've seen in a blockbuster in a long time. So in this movie, Judi Dench is like the head of the fairy police department. And there's this one part where she walks out and her big cool action line is, "Top of the morning to ya." None of the characters have any personality at all. The only slightly good one was the teenage fairy cop girl. Artemis was absolute trash, and he's one of the most boring characters I've ever seen, along with everyone else in the movie. From what I had heard about the books, Artemis Fowl was supposed to be like this really cool super villain who's like always one step ahead of everyone else, kind of like a light Yagami. But in this movie, he's just boring. Apparently Disney thought that audiences wouldn't relate to an evil little kid, so they made him just smart and not an evil genius. A bunch of the fans of the books are upset because the main character does not resemble the one in the book at all, and it's just boring to general audiences because it strips away any personality the film could have had and leaves us with a bland protagonist we don't care about. Also, this is like part 1 of a movie. Almost nothing's resolved, and they think that they're going to get a sequel, and that's really cute that they think they're going to get a sequel. Or maybe they can just lie and say this is the biggest movie of all time. This movie also like never starts. It feels like you're in the first 10 minutes of a movie, the entire movie. The CG in this movie was just so awful. There's that famous clip that everybody's seen where Josh Gad pulls his mouth open and it looks terrifying. There's also a troll in the movie that looks almost as bad as the troll in the first Harry Potter movie, but that movie's almost 20 years old, so that's embarrassing. Artemis Fowl, you're an embarrassment. So there are just so many problems with this movie that you could get so much content out of this, so I'm just going to briefly walk through the plot. Also, spoilers if you care about it, which you shouldn't. I would not waste my time watching this. So the movie starts out with news footage talking about how there have been a bunch of robberies at museums, which is really not cliched at all, starting a movie with news footage. Wow, amazing. So then Josh Gad, dressed as Hagrid, shows up at Artemis Fowl's mansion and he gets arrested. He's being interrogated and he says, well, actually fairies and stuff exist, and also there's this really smart kid named Artemis Fowl, and he lives in the most magical place on Earth, which according to Disney is Ireland. Also, he's narrating all of this. Then you go back to the past and see Artemis Fowl surfing for some reason. He goes to school and then Josh Gad's narrating and telling us how awesome and different and special Artemis is, and that he's really smart and clever and he doesn't fit in with the other kids. He goes to counseling and the counselor reads his biography and it's like, your mom is dead and your dad is never around. And I think he's the only one in the entire movie that has like a real Irish accent. Literally, they are reading his biography to get exposition to the audience. This is the laziest movie ever. Why would a little kid who's like 11 or however old write a biography about himself? What does he have to write about? He's done nothing. He's 11. Then he's like, I'm too smart for counseling. So he hoverboards home and sees his dad, played by Colin Farrell, who is also named Artemis Fowl. And his dad's like, I know I said I was going to be home, but I have to leave again. And the bad writing continues as the kid is like, I don't want to believe in fairies. I want to believe in you. Then they try to show how smart Artemis is by showing that he built this Rube Goldberg machine that's made out of Legos, which is an alarm to wake him up every morning. Why go through the struggle of making that when you can just use an alarm? Put your mind to something else. Why make this needlessly complicated alarm clock? This is so stupid. Also, Artemis apparently lives by himself at home all the time, even though he's like 11. So then this butler character shows up and he's literally a master of every single martial art. The narration's like he trained for 20 years on top of a mountain and he learned to box for 15 years and he also fences and knows taekwondo. So the butler's like sneaking around because apparently Artemis doesn't know about him. So then Artemis watches the news and the anchor's like, Artemis Fowl has disappeared and he's also a culprit of all these museum robberies. And Artemis Jr.'s like, no. And he drops his drink in slow-mo, which is not cliched at all. So then Artemis gets a call by this girl in a black hood that looks like a heartless, and her name's like Opal or Obo or Oprah. I could never understand what they were saying. So Opal's like, I have your dad, bring me this magic Magoo and I'll let him go. And then she lets Artemis Jr. talk to Artemis Sr. and he's like, do it son, get the magic Magoo for her. She also talks on this green hologram thing for some reason, even though she never talks to anyone with holograms and is only talking to people with regular cell phones. I have no idea why they do this, it's so dumb. So Mr. Butler shows Artemis this hidden basement where his dad studied fairies and stuff, and even though Artemis has never been there, he knows where everything is because he's so smart. Artemis just magically knows exactly how to find his dad because his dad used to read him a bedtime story that would tell Artemis how to rescue him if he was kidnapped in this exact situation. Also, Mr. Butler brings his niece to train Artemis in fighting, even though Butler's literally trained in everything ever, but his niece like does nothing throughout the rest of the movie and only has like 2 lines. It's so dumb. I have no idea why she's there. Then the niece character makes Artemis a sandwich. Glad to see that you're challenging gender roles, Disney. Good job. Great. Wow. Keep it up. So progressive. Congratulations. Then we see the fairy world, which is underground, and Josh Gad is a giant dwarf. That's really funny. Haha. And all the dwarves don't like him because of that. So then there's these goblins that are like criminals, and they all wear backwards hats and basketball jerseys and hoodies. I wonder what you're trying to say, Kenneth Branagh. There's this fairy police group named L.E. Precon. Get it? It's like leprechaun. Haha. Even though they never say what this means. So Oprah finds this fairy in prison and is like, I'm getting you out, but you have to infiltrate Leprechaun for me. And literally he says, I spy. And Oprah says, spy or you die. So there's this teenage fairy cop girl and they do the thing where it's like, you're only 100, you're so young. That's so creative. Good job, guys. Not cliched at all. The teenage fairy cop girl is like, I want to go on a mission and you never let me go. So Judi Dench is like, fine, you can go. So she sends her to fight this troll that shows up at a wedding for some reason. The teenage fairy cop girl gets swung around by the troll and almost dies, so other fairies have to launch this time freeze bubble that covers where the wedding is, and they come in and take the troll back underground and wipe everyone's memory, but they leave the entire wedding a mess, so everyone's just like, what happened? Was nobody in these tall buildings that were not covered by the time freeze bubble? Was there no one in this quiet city at night that heard hundreds of people screaming and a troll roaring? Nobody heard anything? They use these like Men in Black mind wipe devices on each individual person, so you can't say, oh, they just wiped the entire city, because the movie clearly shows that they did not. So basically during all that, the fairy that broke out is talking to Judi Dench and is doing some more great exposition again. He says, don't you know who Teenage Fairy Cop Girl is? Her dad is a super bad dude and he stole the magic Magoo from us, but luckily we killed him. We just don't know what he did with the magic Magoo. Because that's how all conversations go. Natural conversations. Great job, Kenneth Branagh. I'm so proud of you. So then for some reason, Teenage Fairy Cop Girl says she's going to clear her dad's name and goes rogue. And she goes to this tree that Artemis and Mr. Butler also know fairies go to. So Mr. Butler literally shoots Teenage Fairy Cop Girl and takes her hostage at Artemis's mansion. Artemis knows that fairies go there because he read some book, and she's just going there for some reason. I have no idea what's happening. Then Leprechaun is like, we gotta go save Teenage Fairy Cop Girl. So they all invade Artemis's mansion by creating another another time freeze bubble, and then showing up on his front yard. For some reason, fairies can't enter people's houses unless they're also invited in, but Artemis is so smart that he knows this rule, and knows that the fairy's only option is to call up the criminal Josh Gad dwarf and get him out of prison, because he can dig into the dirt and enter Artemis's mansion. So Artemis knows that Josh Gad loves treasures, so he knows that he will enter the mansion and unlock the magic magoo, which he somehow figured out was in his house. Artemis was so smart that he knew that that exact sequence of events was going to happen. This happens, and then the I Spy guy throws a coup and overtakes the leprechaun and sends the troll from earlier inside the mansion to get the magic magoo, even though he just literally breaks anything, so I don't know how this plan is supposed to work. But this time, the troll is 10 times bigger and 10 times angrier because he ate some special berries or something. I have no idea what's happening. I don't even care. There's a really lame action scene where the troll teleports between rooms chasing Artemis because there's no consistency in the set design. The troll jumps from the top floor to Artemis, but the butler pushes him out of the way and the troll lands on Mr. Butler, and then the chandelier falls for some reason and lands on both of them. Mr. Butler dies even though he has no blood, no sign of harm, he's completely normal looking, he didn't look like he was crushed. But then Teenage Fairy Cop Girl decides that she likes Artemis now, so she brings him back to life with Ray Force magic. And then the time freeze starts to break down and starts killing all the fairies for some reason. This causes all of Leprechaun to leave, but what a twist, actually somehow Artemis just made it seem like everything was breaking down. But actually Artemis, Mr. Butler, the niece, Teenage Fairy Cop Girl, and Josh Gad Hagrid are okay. Also the niece is here in this scene, even though she does nothing throughout the entire movie except she makes Artemis a sandwich. Then Teenage Fairy Cop Girl figures out how to use the magic magoo that she just said would kill anyone that uses it to teleport Artemis's dad back to their house. Then Artemis calls the heartless oboe girl because he has her phone number for some reason and is like, LOL, I got you, you suck, haha. But if Artemis had Oboe's phone number and he knew he could talk to his dad, why not just ask him where the magic magoo is and have Teenage Fairy Cop Girl teleport him back in the first place and not deal with Leprechaun at all? I guess there wouldn't be enough action scenes that way. Then the movie starts to end, but there's 5 scenes that you think are the end. I mean, it challenges Return of the King in this department. Maybe it just felt like that because they couldn't wait for the movie to end. There's a scene where Teenage Fairy Cop Girl gets promoted to head of Leprechaun. There's a scene where Artemis and Artemis talk about how much they love each other and fly away in a helicopter. There's a scene where Teenage Fairy Cop Girl gets told to go hunt down the evil people that originally tried to steal the magic magoo, but then her dad actually stole it to try and keep it away from them. This movie makes no sense at all. And then there's one more scene. So we go back to the start of the movie where Josh Gad is in prison getting interrogated, and it's all in black and white for some reason. As it turns out, Josh Gad was only arrested because Artemis wanted him to be, and the main cast drops a ladder through the glass ceiling that all high security prisons in the middle of the ocean obviously have, and they pull him into the helicopter. I guess Artemis wanted the government to know about all this for some reason. I mean, he didn't clear his father's name because they're still going to steal stuff. I have no idea what's happening in this movie. Artemis says he's the world's greatest criminal even though he never stole anything throughout the entire movie and just protected something he already had, and credits roll. This movie's so cute. They set up for a sequel because they think they're going to get one. This is by far the worst movie of 2020 so far, and it might just be the worst because it's only one of 5 movies that are getting released. So yeah, Artemis Fowl upset the book fans, didn't give anybody that didn't read the books an enjoyable time, and didn't even make it in theaters because it was such a failure. I would say avoid this like the plague, but we're living through one right now and people aren't avoiding it anyways, so just don't watch this movie under any circumstances. And I'm giving Artemis Fowl a 2 out of 10. I don't expect this movie to get a sequel in the slightest, but maybe since it's on Disney Plus, Disney can just lie and say it's the most viewed thing ever. We're in such a movie drought right now, people are just looking for anything to review. When we get to November though, there's going to be 100 movies coming out if we even get there. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more gaming and movie content every Tuesday along with random reviews throughout the week. See ya.
This is Boomerang from Cartoon Network.